Hello everybody, I'm George from Ireland. So I'm going to carry on my video considering Trump's chances in the 2024 presidential election. So will he be able to stand in 2024? Well, the first requisite is that he be alive. Now, a man of 75, who's very obese, who never exercises, he can't walk more than 100 yards, he's always getting into those golf carts, who eats junk food, would seem to be a pudgy life insurance liability. He boasts that he never drinks alcohol. Well, actually, red wine would be just what the doctor ordered, because it's an antioxidant. It would actually be good for his heart in small doses. There is a superabundance of evidence that he's got pre-Alzheimer's. It's hereditary, and his father had it. Both his brothers died well before 75, as did his father, which obviously doesn't guarantee that he will die very soon. So what are the chances he'll even be alive in November 2024? But I think high, 90%. I've given some of the reasons to believe that he wouldn't be. The reason to believe that he will be alive is because he never smoked, he never touched drugs, he's obviously got family, he's got people around him, he's motivated, Fury keeps him going, he's got the best medical care in the world, and coronavirus ability to just bounce off him, although that is a bit of a risk because this can have lifelong effects. Even if you beat it, your health might never be quite the same again. But even if he's still a going concern in 2024, he may well be much diminished, half the man he used to be. He's owed a myocardial infarction or stroke or something. Now, he's made himself a candidate for cancer as well. But anyway, if he avoids these fates, he will be lucky. So yeah, he could still be alive, but might well be in a wheelchair or something like that. Now, wouldn't necessarily preclude election. Look at Roosevelt, elected when attitudes to physical disability were barbaric, especially compared to today. Admittedly, Roosevelt's disability was never disclosed to the public, astonishingly. He was always there, seated, making an oration. Everyone stands to orate. These photos, how do people not figure it out? Him and Churchill sitting down on the deck of a warship singing a hymn. All the other congregants are standing up. Anyway, but some would see Trump as being unfit for the presidency if his health was seriously compromised. Now, he himself mocked the disabled, so if he were disabled, that'd probably work against him. Anyway, if he stands in 24, well, that's a big if. Will he seek the Republican nomination? I give it an 80% chance that he will, and that's independent of whether or not he's alive. Obviously, he's got to be alive, and if he does seek it, I say there's like a 60% chance he'll get it. Sorry, that's not contingent on the first percentage. There's a 60% chance now that he will be the Republican candidate next time. Okay, obviously anything can happen at backgammon apart from him dying, some other very strong Republican candidate emerging, or whatever. Very good news, very bad news for the Democrats could alter all this. Anyway, so why would people vote for him when they've rejected him twice? Why would they give him a third attempt? How will he have improved by 2024? If anything, he'll be less fit and even more cantankerous. So he's still by far the biggest beast in the grand old party, and he's holding rallies again very soon. But Republican politicians are not as keen on him as registered Republicans are, perhaps because politicians are cannier, they're more pragmatic, the rank and file are probably more fired up. And this thing is how Trump sort of appeals to the brain stem, or not, what's it called, the limbic part of the brain, to really get emotion going and shut down the rational part of the brain. Appeals to the visceral emotions. So there are plenty of Republican senators, congressmen, state legislators, governors, and so forth, who regard Trump as yesterday's man, and they want their shot at it, right? He's had 2 goes at being their candidate, and there are other people with a vaulting ambition who want to run for the presidency themselves. And so they don't want Trump to not hog the nomination, nor his family to do so. Anyway, because remember, the people's message to Trump in 2020 was, "You're fired," to borrow a phrase from The Apprentice. Why would people change their minds? So his voters are disproportionately elderly. By 2024, 8% of people who voted Trump last time will have died. And they're being replaced by people who've turned 18 since 2020, already become naturalized US citizens. Now, Trump does particularly poorly amongst the youngest voters. I know Republicans always have difficulty amongst the youngest voters. However, Trump is more unpopular than usual, even for a Republican candidate, amongst people in their teens and 20s. So these youngsters reaching 18 will make things even worse for Trump. Now, Biden has elderly voters too, dying, but fewer each year. But plus, he's got more new voters in the cohort that's coming on. So more people turn 18 each year than die each year as well. So Trump could choose Ivana as his running mate, and that would negate some of the, Ivanka, negate some of the advantage of the Democrats if they got Kamala on their ticket, either as VP or as president, because that would balance the gender advantage for Kamala, or it would be a balanced ticket for the Trumps because Ivanka would be offering youth to offset her father's age. But there could be another Republican ticket not involving him. So, the Republican Party has been dominated by Trump since 2015, when he said he was seeking the nomination. And they may have had enough, especially by 2024, that'd be almost 9 years. So another dynasty might not be what they're looking for. Dynasties, well, didn't quite work out for the Clintons. All right, the Bush family had 8 presidential terms between them. I know there was John Quincy Adams. W only won by fluke in 2000. He won due to a still popular war in 2024 and satisfactory economic growth. Jeb Bush, sometime governor of Florida, failed in his bid to secure the Republican nomination, failed by actually quite a long way. So who else might enter the fray on the Republican side? Well, there's Ted Cruz, who came second, a distant second to Trump in 2016. He's that Texan senator with impeccable conservative credentials. And I think he actually believes what he says, unlike Trump. So anyway, he's obviously from a major state, and a state that the Republicans can no longer take for granted. So who else might there be? Marco Rubio, he's good looking, soft spoken, and he could reach out to people who wouldn't usually vote Republican. Obviously, his Hispanic background would appeal to more Hispanic voters, who the Republican parties have made some inroads into that community, but they badly need to do so more because they're growing. Anyway, then there's, say, Mitt Romney. Now, Mitt Romney failed once, and you don't get another shot at it. And I don't think Trump should either. But anyway, I think the Republicans will foolishly go for him. The Republicans will be better served by another candidate, probably. But Romney voted against Trump in the impeachment trial, and that's tarnished him irreparably in the eyes of the Republican base. Look at Mitch McConnell, too much of a turtle. He's old, he's unappealing, he's a wily strategist, but no poster boy, and I think he would really turn off independents. He wouldn't excite the base either. Look at Nikki Haley, might do well. She's an ethnic minority woman. That both would be big pluses for the Republicans. She'd attract independents. So she's the acceptable face of her party. Then there's Christie, the quantum governor of New Jersey. Might be a credible candidate. He managed to win in a state which is not safe for the Republicans. And it was also a fairly popular state. He reached across to the Arta Democrats. He famously had a good working relationship with Obama. But is he just so morbidly obese he couldn't even be considered? I mean, is that just risible? But maybe that sort of fat shaming, that's discrimination against people who are whales, as they say. So who else could you talk about? Tom Cotton is increasingly talked about, who would be the right age. He's very healthy. He has hawkish views, although I think being gung-ho is not quite so fashionable after the pullout of Afghanistan. I think another war is about the last thing people want. How about Paul Ryan coming back? Remember, he stood for the vice presidency alongside Mitt Romney. And he doesn't attract the same opprobrium that failing to be president does. Remember, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, he failed to be vice president before several years later standing for and winning the presidency. Ryan's not too old by any measure. He looks good on TV. He's excellently physically fit. He's got this apparent plausibility about him. He seems reasonable. And again, he managed to win, and I think it was Minnesota, a state which, until recent years, wasn't very safe territory for the Republicans. So all of these people don't want Trump to run because they want it for themselves. And they don't think they particularly wish to see his daughter either, but they might be willing to have her as a running mate. Anyway, I think they might be convinced the only feasible long-term strategy is to move on for Trump. As I say, he's lost the popular vote for them twice. It's only by an extraordinary stroke of good fortune for Republicans that they managed to win the Electoral College in 2016. So Trump is a loser twice. So get someone who can win. So let's come on to policies. Well, we can't just be looking at psephology. Why would you vote for a party? Okay, there's a candidate. There are also policies. Now, Trump seldom has policies. He's got messages. He's going to have his talking points. For him, it's all negative cohesion. Are you hating who I'm hating? So it's about monstering out groups. So Trump likes to identify enemies. He can create more bugbears if he needs to. He'll radiate odium. It's liberals, Muslims, the media, social justice warriors, snowflakes, feminists, illegal immigrants, criminals, terrorists, environmentalists. They're all in the same bag with him. But these messages are going to resonate a bit less in future because SJWs, not as unpopular as they used to be, or liberals or feminists are ever more prevalent. I mean, more Americans view themselves as liberal than conservative. They're becoming more widely tolerated anyway. If the left can tone down its nonsense about safe spaces and so on, that would be welcome. So the public wants an amnesty for long-term illegal residents. DACA was popular. A lot of people got friends or family who benefited from that. Sanctuary cities have embedded those who arrived illegally as children in the United States as members of communities that would have been here for decades, soon to be for generations. So it just seems unreasonable and unchristian to boot these people out. But with the US out of Afghanistan, harping on about how much you abominate Muslims is not going to prove as electorally advantageous as it once did. So if there are no major terrorist attacks over the next 3 years, counter-terrorism as a message is not going to have very much traction. On the other hand, it could play well. If the Taliban use Afghanistan as a base to launch major attacks in the United States, then this message could really hit home. But so far, all the indications are the Taliban want to live and let live. They seem to have learnt their lesson. Don't provoke the West, and they can rule on. So anyway, Trump can speak up for gun rights, but what's he going to do about it? What did he do about it? I mean, nothing. The president has absolutely no control over gun laws. And Trump rallies are gun-free zones. If he really thought guns were good, he would say, please bring all the guns you want to my rallies. Nonetheless, it seems to be compulsory for Republicans to harp on about how gun control is so evil, and to have minimal, if any, background checks to allow just about anyone to privately sell a firearm to anybody else, children to be able to have automatic weapons and so on. So illegal immigration is not a particularly high saliency issue, that is. It got higher a bit under Trump because he was banging on about it, but doesn't that simply remind people of his failure to build an inch of wall and his failure to get Mexico to pay a peso towards it? And that's despite Trump diverting billions of dollars to the military to build this non-existent wall and shutting down the government for the longest ever time to build that wall. On this wall, he failed. And he can blame Congress for that. But he's the one who promised it. Don't promise it unless you can actually deliver it. Congress is not obliged to do what the president wants. Republican Congresses often haven't done what Democratic presidents want. Okay, it's Congress's prerogative. They vote the way they see fit. So they're not obliged to fulfill the president's electoral pledges for him. If he makes a pledge he can't deliver, well, that's his stupid fault. So Donald John shall return to the issue of abortion. The president doesn't have the ability to prevent a single abortion except in the US military, which he didn't do, because the US military provides health care to its service personnel and their families. And some of those women in the US military, or wives of US personnel, they want abortions and they have them, whether medically necessary or not. If he really opposed abortion, he would order all the doctors and the nurses in the US military to never provide abortions. Anyway, not all Republicans are pro-life. Christie Todd Whitman, she was the governor of New Jersey in the 90s. She was pro-abortion. Anyway, the US is increasingly pro-choice. Despite about 35% of Americans being pro-life, it's still a vital issue for the Republicans. So about a quarter of Republican voters are actually pro-choice. And I know there are various levels of pro-choice and levels of pro-life. Anyway, it motivates evangelicals who are very crucial in these certain swing states who donate a lot of money and have got a very high turnout rate. So that is vital for the Republican Party. So if Trump said he was pro-choice or even failed to mention the issue, that would hurt him badly. So no Republican these days dares to equivocate on this issue. So anti-environmentalism is unlikely to work well. Yes, big oil hates environmentalism, and so polluters have got very deep pockets, and saying, well, this will lead to lower gas prices, and that is actually true. But is that worth it in the price you'd pay environmentally in the longer term? But anyway, most Americans realize that science is true, that the climate change is happening and is at least partly anthropomorphic. No, what's the word? Anthropogenic, that's it. And there are economic sacrifices which have to be made to tackle it, and that's the hard truth. But if you invest enough in green energy in the long run, it could be a big saving and energy independence, and don't have to care about the Middle East, and there'll be a win-win-win. But in the short term, there might be some unpopular sacrifices to be made. I don't think there are enough anti-scientific people out there to make it a winning strategy to say we'll just poison ourselves and heat up the planet with gay abandon. Now, calling Biden a communist and Kamala Harris a socialist, when it didn't work last time, I don't think it's going to work this time. It's so flagrantly false. He hasn't taken away people's private property or forbidden you to make a profit or whatever it is, or outlawed religion. But it'll be even more obviously an outrageous lie, this hogwash, by the time next election rolls around. But it undermines trusted Republicans when they tell such barefaced lies. Then when you're not sure, you can't give them the benefit of the doubt. It's like the boy who cried wolf. So, in short, this anti-enlightenment constituency, there's a core element of the Republican base, is not big enough on its own. You've got to reach out to other people. Republicans think they need to throw a bit of red meat to the base to get them excited, and okay, it actuates them. But saying climate change is a hoax, affordable healthcare is communism, is not enough on its own. Might work in the midterm elections. Be fascinating to see what happens a bit over a year's time. I think the Republicans probably will win both the House and the Senate, which will cause problems to sort of, it'll palsy the Biden administration. But Trump won in 2020. That's another provable, flagrant falsehood. All this nonsense is not going to be enough to win the presidential election. So Trump talked tough on trade, but he didn't actually improve trade. His sanctions were soon scrapped. He did not win a trade war. He never even cited an example of a trade war that the United States has won. So the standing talking points won't win the popular vote in 2024. So what else can he do? We come back to abortion. All he did is he appointed some pro-life judges, but there was no case that came up. I mean, Republicans have been appointing pro-life judges since the 70s, but without effect. These standard talking points weren't enough in 2016 or 2020. Why would they be enough in 2024? Especially when the sort of people they appeal to is shrinking, albeit slowly. So, yes, Trump won the Electoral College in 2016 through happen chance. He was incredibly fortunate with the efficient distribution of his vote. It was a black swan event. And, all right, I know George W. Bush won the Electoral College also in 2000, despite losing the popular vote, but that was by a slender margin. That was by 500,000 votes, not 3 million votes. Therefore, the chance of Trump winning the Electoral College, despite losing the popular vote by anything like 3 million votes, let alone the 7 million votes he lost last time, is really very slim indeed. So not just Trump, but the Republican Party needs to find some new and attractive messages. They're unpalatable to swathes of the country. They need to appeal to more people. It needs to retain enough of its base whilst also winning over enough independents. And that's the very tricky balancing act. That's the magic formula that's so hard for politicians to get right in elections. The moment there's little chance of that transpiring. So kowtowing to Putin, to Xi, to Kim Jong-un didn't play that well with military veterans or traditional Republicans. Surprisingly, it didn't put very many off. I know there was the Lincoln Project. The US won no concessions from those tyrants whom Trump was always sucking up to. So some people voted for Trump in 2020 because they loathed the Biden-Harris ticket. But Biden and Harris will be the incumbents next time, so that's not going to work so well. And I think they will prove not to be as bad as their enemies said they were. So anyway, so Trump won't benefit from such negative voting as much as it did last time. So he needs to come up with some new and attractive policies, and I'm not hearing any so far. Not that attract me particularly, but attract enough of middle America. So please follow me on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook. Toodaloo.